There's about 1 week left of VKet, and we probably want to update our booth now and make sure that we have close to the final version or the final version uploaded before the deadline. If you haven't uploaded your booth yet, now's the time. You definitely want to do that. So what you're going to do is make a new Unity project. I recommend doing it this way rather than using an existing Unity project. Really, it's up to you, but you're going to have the least problems this way. You'll be able to find the submission guideline on the My Page link. So you click on your username, go to My Page, and you're going to find the submission guideline. This will explain the submission process from start to finish. Obviously, you probably have Unity 2018.4, 20F1. If you're into the open beta on VRChat that is just released, you're still going to want to use 2018.4 unless we tell you otherwise. You want to set up the project with VRC SDK 3, which of course you can get from vrchat.com, and create your booth, which I'm sure you already have if you are an exhibitor at this point. If not, get to it because this is it. Finally, you're going to submit with Vcat tools, which is downloadable from My Page as well. You'll notice here that there's a link to the official distribution package, and upon clicking that link, if it ends up in Japanese, you can just go to the language settings again and switch it to English. The official distribution package will be here, and you'll get a manual for it as well for each one of the package contents for the different things that you can do. There's a special pickup package, a special follow pickup package, which allows you to put the object on different parts of the body. So if you're selling accessories, you can do that. There's also a sound fade. So this allows you to play a sound when you interact or if you enter the booth or come into the booth, and it will fade out as you leave. There's a few things as well that have been added this time, like the Vcat language switcher, and of course the web page opener, which is going to open your v-market.work page. There's also templates for things to show GUI, to create buttons, and other things that you might find really useful if you want to add some gimmicks to your booth. For the first step, it's very important that you install the VRC SDK 3 Worlds package first. That's really important because you need to set up the layers on VRChat's SDK and sign in. And if you haven't found it yet, the Vcat tools can be downloaded from here on My Page, down at the bottom under submission. One thing you should read through is both the submission rules as well as the submission guidelines. The other thing that's really important is you need to use half-width alphanumeric characters. It's better just to not use spaces at all. So you can use underscores or dashes or dots and parentheses for files and folder names, but I highly recommend trying to just use hyphens and underscores if you really need those. All the files in the folder should have the above file names too. So that means you can't have any spaces in your file names. Make sure that it should be within 184 characters and under assets in Unity. That includes folders too. So if anything are in subfolders, that could be a problem. It's usually best not to use subfolders at all. This is because of things that can happen with the submission via third-party content storage providers, not really us. So of course, the static settings, this has layer settings as well, and we want to make sure that you use those correctly, and you want to make sure that for static items that it is set like this for dynamic items. These shaders don't actually have to be included in the submission folder, so you can have the shaders inside your Unity package, but you can save space. If they're included in the submission folder, it may actually increase the file size, which could trip the regulation check, and you don't want that. One other thing that you might not have known is that you can use Udon Behaviors, and you can have 10 or less per booth, as long as, and that includes ones that aren't in the official prefabs. You can use the ones that are in the official prefabs, but there's a section for Udon rules as well. You can use VRC Object Sync, but 5 or less. We're allowing you to do a lot more this time than previous VCats because there's less exhibitors by design. VRC Object Pool, you can have 1 per booth. You can have 10 VRC pickups, which is quite a lot. And of course, you can have 4 VRC stations as well. There's quite a lot of things that you can do in here, including physics engines. We don't recommend mesh colliders for performance reasons, but other colliders can be done. Rigid bodies, as long as they're kinematic. We can have cloth even for booth, and a number of other things. I'm not going to go through all of the rules here. Please read the en/rules on the v6.v-market.work page to make sure that all of your directional lighting, that there's no additional directional lighting and other things of that nature. You have constraints and so on and so on. So there's a lot of things you can do this time, and you can be super dynamic. I know it's not a lot of time from the release of this video to add any of these things in, but hopefully you've gone ahead and done this. And if there's any gotchas that I might come across, basically I'm going to go through the things that are most commonly tripping people up. Heading back into Unity, the first thing you actually want to do is find VRC SDK World and add it in. The next step is you want to set up the layers for VRChat. Then you want to set the collision matrix for VRChat. Once this is done, you can auto-fix the light generation too. Now you're ready to add the Vcat tools. Go ahead and drag Vcat tools in, or use package, custom package, under import. The next step is to go to Vcat tools and open up the control panel. You're going to go ahead and log in with your Vcat account. You're going to see an authorization page pop up in your browser. If you don't see an authorization page pop up in your browser, try again. If you still don't see it, make sure to log in to the web page to be absolutely sure. If that's working good, you're able to get a circle, and you should have your placement world as well as the submission rules. The submission deadline is listed here. We're getting pretty close. The next step after successfully logging in is to import the official assets, including the prefabs from the packages. You can find this on the bottom right of the control panel, this little section here, and you'll notice that each one of the packages are here. So let's go ahead and install the shaders. Keep in mind that each one of these packages may take a little while. Next, the Vcat Udon prefabs, Udon Sharp. Big shout out to Merlin for this. If you didn't know, Vcat Tools is built upon Vcat, which is a process for large collaboration in worlds and allows you to easily build projects like this. And finally, the exhibitor booth manager. Our next step is to create the submission scene. So at the top, we're going to click this button here, and you're going to get something like this. It should select the correct world for you. If for some reason you don't see your exhibitor ID, close Vcat Tools and reopen Vcat Tools using the menu. Then you should be able to load the submission scene. Once the template has been created for the world scene, go ahead and open up your exhibitor ID and open up the scene. So you're going to want to go in and look at your model. There's a few things you can set up over here. Mainly, you want to go to materials and use external materials. That way, everything is expanded. So we'll create a material setup and import those assets. Next, whether your content is static or dynamic, you're going to want to go ahead and put that under static or dynamic. Your booth should fit inside, and generally, you're going to want to make sure it's facing the right way. You're probably going to want to have some avatar pedestals inside the world. In our case, we're probably going to use these. You can find that inside the Vcat assets under Vcat prefabs. In this case, it's going to be avatar pedestal. And in our case, I think we're going to end up using 2D. You'll notice that this is reversed. This probably means that our booth is backwards, so let's make sure that we fix that. Vcat pedestals and other dynamic objects and other prefabs need to be under dynamic. Pedestal itself has a README in Japanese, but I'm going to translate it here for you. It reads, "This is an avatar pedestal that displays a confirmation window. You can use an image for the look, meaning you can put an image inside where it says sample. You have to set the blueprint ID to the VRC avatar pedestal, and you can change the image to be used by changing the source image of the canvas object. That's this one over here. If you want to change the size, you have to change the scale of the pedestal 2D object, not the canvas, so the whole thing. Right now you've got the sample image, and in this case, I can choose any other sprite object from inside. So in our case, for example, we'll probably want to take this image here, and because all of ours are at-list, we may actually have to go in and create some more. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and set the sample or our blue morpho avatar, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Now remember, I have to resize the whole thing, and I'm probably going to want to format it to fit correctly. Underneath the pedestal itself, this is where you put the blueprint ID. Just to give a quick review of what all of the three avatar pedestals are, 2D doesn't have that shimmering look that you see from the standard 2D avatar pedestal in VRChat. The default one actually has the default shimmer effect that is visible in VRChat for regular avatar pedestals, and Avatar Pedestal 3D allows you to use a 3D model as your avatar pedestal. It has a capsule collider and still has the confirmation like the other ones. You can find additional information about that on the submission guidelines, as well as images. You can also support a video player to play a video on Interact. So if you want to have a video showing off your avatar, you can do that. More than likely, you're going to want Vcat Web Page Opener in here as well. This will open the special page on v-market.work for your booth. The circle page opener will open the entire circle page showing everything, and the item page opener will open individual items. For example, in our case, we probably want to have these right next to each of the avatars. The text in item page opener reads, "Interact to open the web page on Virtual Market Beta in your browser." This prefab will only work in the venue during Virtual Market 6. So when we rebuild the venues and bring them back in, unfortunately, that won't work after the fact. So just during the 10-day event period. You're going to set the item ID of the product that you want to show with item page opener in the ID component object. That's this one. So you'll put your item ID after you've submitted it to Virtual Market. At Virtual Market Beta site, you can mark an item as not yet published. So feel free to put an item ID in there before you've published it. You can also change the image to be used by changing the source image under Canvas. So you don't need to use our buy logo. You can also change the size and the scale of the web page opener object. The circle page opener opens your entire circle page. Now, you can have this be a capsule collider. So for example, we could put this over top of one of the avatars here, but if you want it to be 2D, you can have it be a button as well. Don't forget to put it under dynamic. There's many other prefabs in here, including item pages that can switch from English to Japanese, as well as many other tools that are available. Once you've got your booth up and running, you're going to want to check it. Remember that if you're deciding to use your own shader or a variant of one of the shaders that are included, and not the one that comes with Vcat tools, you're going to need to include it inside the package. So for example, I want to use Silence filamented shader here. So I'm going to include the filamented master folder inside so that I can actually use that shader. So again, if you are using a newer version of a shader that's available or some other shader, you need to make absolutely sure that you include it inside the submission, and its size will count towards the full size of the booth. Also, don't forget to set up your layers. You're going to need those layers to be correct for each one of those settings. For static objects, including everything that's a child under a static object, you're going to want to set static, batching static, occludee static, and reflection probe static. For your dynamic objects, like the item page opener and avatar buttons, you're going to want to set it to nothing. While you're building your booth, you might find some things like this occur. This could mean that your bounds are off based on the material you're using or something like that. This is easily fixed in my case. The plants and flower boundaries are a little bit high, so I'm going to go ahead and revert those, and we're good now. Once your booth is the way you want it, of course with everything in there, you want to make sure that all your shaders are included and that everything looks right. The next step is going to be to check your booth via Vcat tools. So inside Vcat tools, open up your control panel, be sure to save first, and run a booth check. So in this case, I'm going to have a bunch. You'll notice that there's unsupported characters in folder and file names in this case, so we need to make sure that all of that's set correctly. Let's do it again. Again, you're going to notice some unsupported symbols and file names. I think this is due to a shader we have here, so we'll check again. You'll notice we've exceeded the file size limit a little bit, so let's fix that. You'll also notice some other things in here. So, for example, the mesh renderers need to be set to the environment layer. Getting pretty close now. Make sure that you also select batching static. Also need to have generate light map UVs, even if you have a UV2. And if you've done anything right, probably the only thing you may have is file size. In my case, I'm probably going to have to crunch my textures. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these down to 2048. Let's run a booth check again. Now it's just the file size. Go ahead and do a build size check. Another thing to note is that you can use post-processing in here, but actually, according to the rules, you should use version 2.3.0. The reference object for the booth trigger can occupy the post-processing layer. Now, during the first time you set up Vcat tools, you may notice that the build size will be completely different from what you would expect. Much larger or much smaller than how your booth was originally set up. Usually all you have to do is restart Unity to get the build complete correctly, and you should be all right. Sometimes that might involve unpacking the prefab. Usually that can help. From here, you should be able to click submission and get all your stuff submitted. You're going to want to take a screenshot at the end, so long as your build size check is passing. So let's move these out of the way and capture the thumbnail. Finally, your upload and your post-upload process. All right, good luck. Make sure that you get your booth submitted before the end of the deadline.